Diallo's breath stopped when he saw his pregnant wife step through the broken doorway of the abandoned house. Rain drummed against the rusted roof. His headlights were off. His heart was not. Aissatou clutched her swollen belly with one hand and a torn leather bag with the other, moving like a woman carrying something more dangerous than fear. Diallo crept closer, each step quieter than his rage. Then the lightning flashed. Through the cracked window he saw her kneel beside a wounded man hidden in the shadows. And when the man lifted his face, Diallo froze. It was Bakary, the brother he believed had destroyed his family and disappeared forever. What would you do if the person you trusted most was hiding the one person you could never forgive? Would you listen first, or walk away for good? Tell me in the comments, which country are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? And if you love emotional stories filled with secrets, betrayal, and powerful twists, subscribe and stay with us for the next part. For 3 full seconds, Diallo did not breathe. Rainwater slid down the cracked glass in front of him, blurring the scene inside the abandoned house into trembling shadows and broken light. But there was no mistake, no trick of lightning, no hallucination born from suspicion and sleepless nights. The man on the floor was Bakary. Bakary with the same sharp cheekbones, the same scar cutting through his eyebrow, the same face Diallo had spent years trying to bury under work, wealth, silence, and hate. His half-brother was supposed to be gone. Gone like the trust in their father's house. Gone like the laughter that used to fill the courtyard before everything turned into whispers, slammed doors, and funerals of things no one could touch. Gone like the family name that had never healed after the scandal. Yet here he was, alive, bleeding, hidden by Diallo's pregnant wife. Inside, Aissatou knelt beside him on the dusty concrete floor, one hand pressed against a blood-soaked cloth near his ribs, the other steadying herself against an overturned wooden crate. Her face looked pale in the weak glow of a battery lantern. Sweat clung to her temples. Her mouth moved quickly, urgently, but Diallo could not hear the words through the rain. He only saw this, her tenderness, her secrecy, her fear. Something hot and savage rose in his chest. He shoved the door open so hard it hit the wall with a crack like a gunshot. Aissatou jerked around with a gasp. Bakary's head snapped up, his eyes widening with the slow shock of a wounded animal cornered at last. For a moment, all 3 of them stared at one another in absolute stillness. Diallo stepped inside, rain dripping from his shoulders. His jaw locked so tight it hurt. So it's true. Aissatou stood up too quickly. Diallo. So it's true. He repeated louder now, voice shaking with something more dangerous than anger. All these nights, all these lies, you came here for him. Keep your voice down, she whispered, glancing toward the broken windows. That glance made everything worse. Diallo let out a bitter laugh. You're worried about being heard? Yes. Aissatou snapped, then lowered her voice again. Please. Not here, not here, as if there were a better place for betrayal. His eyes moved to Bakary. The man tried to push himself upright, one hand against the wall, but pain hit him hard, and he nearly collapsed again. He looked thinner than Diallo remembered. Harder, older. His beard was rough and streaked with grey at the chin. His shirt was torn. Blood had dried dark across one side of his body. Diallo felt no pity, only disgust. You should have stayed dead, he said. Aissatou flinched. Bakary did not. Bakary lifted his gaze and met Diallo's eyes with a silence that felt almost unbearable. You still speak before you think. Diallo moved before he even realized it. 2 strides, then one violent grab at Bakary's collar. The lantern rocked. Aissatou cried out. Bakary winced but didn't fight back, and that restraint enraged Diallo even more. "Don't," Aissatou said, grabbing Diallo's arm. "He's injured." He turned on her so sharply she stepped back. "And you care?" The words landed like a slap. Aissatou stared at him, hurt, flashing openly across her face. "That's what you think this is?" Diallo's laugh was sharp, humorless. "What else should I think?" My wife disappears in the middle of the night while carrying my child, and I find her kneeling beside the man who destroyed my family. Bakary's face tightened. "I didn't destroy—" "Shut up, Diallo!" thundered. The shout echoed through the house. Immediately, Aissatou looked toward the far hallway. That small movement did not escape him. His voice dropped. "Why do you keep looking over there?" Instead of answering, she moved in front of Bakary as if shielding him with her body. That did something terrible inside Diallo. He stepped back slow and stunned as realization twisted into something uglier. "You're protecting him. From me." "I'm protecting all of us," she said. "No." His eyes burned. "You made your choice long before tonight." The accusation hung in the air. Aissatou's hand went to her belly. Not dramatic, instinctive, protective. Diallo saw it and hated himself for noticing the fear in her before he hated her for causing it. Bakary coughed, then leaned his head back against the wall. "If you came to punish someone, punish me." "Leave her out of it." Diallo rounded on him. "You don't get to speak her name. You don't get to tell me anything. You vanished after Father's collapse. You left the whole family to drown in disgrace. You let everyone believe you stole from him. You let me carry all of it." Bakary's expression changed then. Not into guilt, into something darker, wearier. "You still think that's what happened?" "It is what happened." "No," Bakary said quietly. "It's what you were told happened." The rain seemed louder now, drumming on the broken roof panels overhead. Diallo stared at him. "You expect me to believe that after all these years I don't expect anything from you?" Bakary replied. "Not trust, not forgiveness. I came to disappear again before you found out." "Then why didn't you?" Diallo shot back. Before Bakary could answer, Aissatou spoke. "Because he can barely stand. Because someone stabbed him 2 nights ago. Because if I had not brought him medicine, he would already be dead." Diallo turned to her slowly. "You say that as if I should care." Her eyes filled, but her voice did not break. "I say it because whatever you think of him, he is not the only one in danger." Silence. A distant metallic clatter sounded somewhere outside. All 3 of them froze. Aissatou moved first, rushing to the lantern and lowering its brightness until the room sank into a dim amber haze. Her breathing quickened. She looked toward the rear doorway, then back at Diallo. Now he saw it clearly. This was not the secrecy of romance. This was the secrecy of survival. But suspicion had already poisoned too much inside him. He could not release it that fast. Not when every nerve in his body still screamed betrayal. "Who's outside?" he asked. "No one you want to meet." "Loudly," Bakary muttered. Diallo's lip curled, still speaking in riddles. Aissatou stepped closer, voice barely above a whisper. "Listen to me carefully. I did not tell you because I knew exactly how you would react. Angry first, deaf second, dangerous third." He stared at her wounded pride flaring. "Dangerous to yourself." "Yes." Her face trembled now with exhaustion and urgency. "Diallo, there are people watching our home. I've seen the same motorcycle twice this week. The same white pickup parked 2 streets away. Yesterday someone followed me from the clinic. This is bigger than your anger." His heart gave one hard, involuntary thud. "What did you say?" Bakary shifted, grimacing. "They found me faster than I expected." Diallo looked from one to the other. "Who found you?" Bakary laughed once, dry and bitter. "Men who work for a ghost? Or maybe a saint. Depends on what story you were fed. Enough, Diallo said. Speak plainly. Bakari's eyes hardened. Fine. The past you hate me for. It isn't dead. The man who fed your father's downfall, he's still close to you. Closer than blood. Closer than memory. And if he learns I've spoken to Aissatou, he won't just come for me. He'll come for your wife, your child, you. The words should have sounded insane. Instead, they sounded like a key turning somewhere deep in a locked part of the night. Diallo wanted to reject them, to crush them, to call them manipulation, theater, desperation. But then he remembered the strange missed calls Aissatou had deleted. The nervous way she checked mirrors while driving. The times she had stood at the nursery window longer than usual, as if listening for something outside. His anger did not disappear. It simply split open and made room for fear. Still, he clung to what he understood. You're lying, he said, but without the same force. Bakari held his gaze. If I wanted to lie, I would have told you something easier. Aissatou took a shaky breath. I found him 3 weeks ago. Diallo looked at her. He collapsed near the outreach center after sunset. She continued. At first I thought he was just another injured man asking for help. Then he said your name. He said mine. He said if I loved my husband and my unborn child, I needed to hear the truth before it was too late. And you believed him? Diallo asked. Not at first. Pain flickered across her face. I was terrified. I went home sick that night. I told myself I would never see him again. But the next morning I found something in my car. Bakari closed his eyes as if he already knew what she would say. A photograph, Aissatou whispered. Old. Burned at the edges. Your father standing beside a man whose face had been scratched out. On the back there was a message. Ask why the accounts vanished before Bakari did. Diallo felt the floor tilt beneath him. There had been missing accounts. Old company records their father had once raged over before his final collapse. Diallo had been young, furious, too eager to accept the version handed to him. Afterward, Bakari had betrayed them, stolen money, and fled. A story simple enough to live with. A story sharp enough to build a life around. A story convenient enough to be useful to someone. Outside, the metallic sound came again. Closer this time. Bakari tried to rise, using the wall for support. He failed, cursed under his breath, and nearly fell. Aissatou caught his arm. That simple act stabbed Diallo again, not because it looked intimate, but because it looked human. And he did not know what to do with that. His wife turned to him, desperate now. You don't have to trust him tonight, but you need to stop shouting and start thinking. Please. Footsteps scraped outside the house. Not one person. More than one. All 3 faces changed at once. Bakari's voice dropped to a rough whisper. They found us. Diallo looked toward the door, every muscle tightening. Aissatou pressed one trembling hand to her belly and the other against the table to steady herself. Her eyes found Diallo's, and for the first time that night, he saw not guilt there, but terror. Real terror. Then a beam of white light swept past the cracked window. Someone was outside, and someone was coming in. The flashlight beam slid across the broken window again. Once, twice. Then it vanished. No one in the room moved. Even the rain seemed to hesitate. Diallo stood rigid near the center of the abandoned house, his pulse hammering in his throat. The smell of rust, wet cement, and old smoke pressed around him. Somewhere water dripped through the cracked ceiling into a metal basin, making a sharp, hollow ping that sounded far too loud. Aissatou's breathing had changed. Short, controlled, deliberately quiet. One hand stayed on her swollen belly. The other reached slowly toward the battery lantern, ready to kill the light completely. Bakari was already trying to drag himself upright again, pain carving deep lines into his face. Blood had soaked through the cloth at his side. Outside, a man's voice floated through the rain. "Check the back," another voice answered lower. "Closer." Diallo's eyes snapped toward Isatou. "Who are they?" She barely moved her lips. "I don't know all their names. That is not an answer. It's the only one I have." A crash sounded from somewhere near the rear entrance. Bakary cursed under his breath. "They split up." Diallo stared at him. "You brought them here." Bakary's eyes flashed. "No." They followed her. The words hit like a slap. Diallo turned instantly to Isatou. "You led them here." Her face folded with frustration. "I didn't know they were still behind me." "You didn't know." His voice rose again. "You said people were watching the house. Watching you. And you came anyway." "In your condition I came because he was running a fever and losing blood," she hissed. "Because if I left him here another night, he would die." "And that mattered more than your child," Diallo shot back. The pain on her face this time was immediate and raw. Bakary stepped in before she could answer. "Enough." Diallo wheeled toward him. "You don't command anything here." "No," Bakary said, swallowing against the pain. "But I know the men outside. They are not here to scare us. If they see her, they will use her. If they know she's carrying your child, they will use that too. So decide quickly whether your pride matters more than her life." For the first time since entering the house, Diallo had no response. Isatou took the lantern and switched it off. Darkness swallowed them whole. Only the weak silver flashes of lightning through cracked walls gave the room shape. Another sound. Boots on wet gravel. Then the scrape of metal against wood. "They're trying the side door," Bakary whispered. Diallo's anger was still there, hot and jagged, but it had been forced to stand beside something colder now. Fear. Not for himself. For Isatou. For the child. For the terrible possibility that whatever madness he had stumbled into tonight was real. He leaned closer. "Is there another way out?" Bakary nodded toward the rear corridor. "Kitchen. Then a service alley. But the gate might be chained." Isatou's hand found Diallo's wrist in the darkness. "Please." That one word did what argument could not. He took a breath. "Move." Bakary nearly laughed, but it came out as a pained exhale. "Now you want to listen." "Move," Diallo repeated. The three of them slipped into the corridor. It smelled like mold and dead air. Broken tiles shifted underfoot. Rain seeped through holes in the roof and splashed cold across their faces. Isatou moved carefully but slower than usual, one palm against the wall, the other holding her stomach. Diallo stayed close enough to catch her if she slipped. Bakary limped ahead, guiding them through the dark like a man who had memorized every broken corner. Behind them, the front door burst open. A voice called out, "He was here." Another answered, "Search every room." Isatou's fingers tightened around Diallo's arm. He felt it. And for the first time that night, he did not pull away. They reached the kitchen. Moonlight leaked through missing roof panels and revealed rusted shelves, shattered glass, and a back exit swollen with water damage. Bakary shoved it. It stuck. He shoved again harder, then doubled over, choking on pain. Diallo stepped forward and slammed his shoulder into it. The frame groaned. On the second hit, the door burst outward. Cold rain rushed in. "There," Bakary said, pointing toward a narrow alley overgrown with weeds. The gate. They hurried through mud and debris. Diallo had one arm around Isatou, now helping her over broken stones. She was trembling not only from fear. He could feel it. Fatigue. Strain. The cost of too many lies carried alone. At the end of the alley stood a rusted chain-link gate bound with a thick old padlock. Diallo swore under his breath. Bakary looked behind them. Flashlights were already flickering through the broken kitchen doorway. "We don't have time." Diallo grabbed the chain and yanked. Nothing. He searched the ground, found a length of rusted pipe, and jammed it into the loop of the chain. Metal bit into his palms, muscles strained. The pipe bent. Footsteps splashed closer. Diallo Aissatou whispered. He pulled again with everything he had. The padlock snapped. The gate sprang open. Go, he said. Bakary motioned for Aissatou first. You. She squeezed through, then turned as if refusing to leave the two men behind. Diallo shoved Bakary toward the opening. Bakary stumbled through just as a flashlight beam struck the alley wall behind them. There, someone shouted. Diallo slipped out last and slammed the gate back into place out of instinct, though it would not stop anyone for long. They ran or tried to. Bakary limped. Aissatou was breathing harder now, a tight sound she was trying to hide. Diallo looked around wildly. A dirt path led toward the road. A second led down into a drainage ditch swallowed by tall grass. This way, Bakary said, pointing toward the ditch. No, Diallo said. Too slow. They'll see us on the road. They'll catch us if she collapses in that mud. Aissatou stopped, bent forward, and gripped her side. Both men turned at once. A sharp, humiliating silence followed. Bakary spoke first. How bad? She shook her head. I'm fine. You are not fine. Diallo said. I can walk. Can you run? She didn't answer. Flashlights burst through the gate behind them. Bakary's face tightened. Road. Diallo did not wait for debate. He lifted Aissatou into his arms. She gasped softly. Diallo. I said nothing, he muttered. Save your strength. Something passed across her face then. Not relief exactly, not forgiveness. Just a stunned kind of sorrow, as if this was the husband she had needed hours ago. They pushed toward the road. Bakary stayed close despite his injury, one hand pressed hard to his bleeding side. Behind them, voices rose louder. Stop! A shot cracked through the rain. The sound split the night in two. Aissatou flinched violently in Diallo's arms. Bakary stumbled. Dirt spat up near their feet. They're shooting now, Diallo said. Bakary gave a bitter laugh. Told you. They reached the roadside just as a truck roared past, spraying water. Diallo shouted, but it did not slow. Another pair of headlights appeared in the distance. Bakary squinted through the rain. Then his whole body changed. No, he said. Diallo turned. A white pickup was approaching fast. Not random. Not lost. Intentional. Aissatou's fingers dug into Diallo's shirt. That's the one. The same pickup she had seen near the clinic. Near the house. Watching. It accelerated. Bakary grabbed Diallo's shoulder. Into the ditch. Now they threw themselves off the roadside just as the pickup swerved toward them. Tires screamed on wet gravel. Mud exploded over their bodies. Diallo shielded Aissatou with his own as the truck skidded past, stopped, then reversed. Doors opened. Men jumped out. There were 3 of them. Maybe 4. One carried a flashlight. One held a pistol. One had a long scar running from ear to collar. Even in the rain, even through the blur, they moved like men used to violence. Bakary whispered, The scarred one works for Mamadou. The name struck Diallo like another bullet, though no blood came with it. Mamadou, he said. My Mamadou. Bakary looked at him with something close to pity. That's the problem, little brother. You still think he ever belonged to you. The men spread out. The flashlight beam swept over the ditch grass once, twice. Diallo's mind raced. Mamadou. Impossible. Mamadou had been at his father's funeral. Mamadou had steadied the company when everything collapsed. Mamadou had taught him how to negotiate, how to rebuild, how to survive humiliation without showing it. Mamadou had helped raise him. Hadn't he? Aissatou's whisper shook against his chest. I'm sorry. Diallo looked down at her. Rain clung to her lashes. Mud streaked her cheek. She looked exhausted, terrified, and heartbreakingly human. For what he whispered, for not telling you sooner, a voice barked from the road. "Search the grass!" Bakary leaned in. "There's a culvert 20 meters down. If we reach it, we might make it under the bridge," Might Diallo said. Bakary's mouth twisted. Tonight, might is luxury. The flashlight beam came closer, closer, then stopped. A silence fell so suddenly it felt unnatural. The scarred man lifted his phone, listened, and then spoke to the others. "Leave the woman if you must. The older one matters. Boss says bring Bakary breathing." Bakary closed his eyes once, like a man hearing his own death sentence spoken politely. But Diallo heard something else. "Leave the woman if you must. Not protect her, not spare her, discard her." In that instant, something in him turned. The jealousy, the wounded pride, the obsession with betrayal. None of it vanished, but it was no longer the center. Now there was only one question that mattered. Why would Mamadou want Bakary alive? And what truth was so dangerous that armed men were willing to hunt a pregnant woman through the rain to bury it? Diallo tightened his hold on Aissatou and looked at Bakary in the darkness. "Get us to that culvert," he said. And this time when Bakary met his eyes, he saw it. Not trust, not yet, but the first cracked edge of it. The ditch water was freezing. It soaked through Diallo's trousers as he crouched low, one arm around Aissatou, the other bracing against the slick earth. Rain hammered the grass above them. Mud slid under their knees. A few meters away, Bakary moved first, dragging himself forward with the stubbornness of a man who had survived too long to stop now. "Stay below the ridge," he whispered. "The culvert is under the broken bridge." The flashlight beams kept sweeping the roadside behind them. One passed so near that Diallo saw the white cone of light bleed through the grass blades above his head. Aissatou held her breath against his shoulder. He could feel her heart racing. Or maybe it was his. They crawled. Every movement was slow, filthy, humiliating. Bakary winced with each pull. Blood from his side mixed with rainwater and disappeared into the ditch. Twice he nearly slipped back. Twice Diallo caught the back of his shirt and shoved him forward. Neither man thanked the other. At last the ditch narrowed beneath a cracked concrete bridge. A round culvert pipe opened before them, half clogged with weeds and trash washed in by storms. The black mouth of it looked like something dead and waiting. Bakary pointed. "Inside." Aissatou stared at it. "There could be snakes." "There are definitely men with guns," Bakary said. "Choose your fear." That almost would have been funny on another night. Diallo helped Aissatou into the culvert first. The pipe was low and narrow. Cold water ran through it to mid-calf. The stench of rot hit them instantly. She gagged, covered her mouth, then kept moving. He followed behind her. Bakary came last. The darkness inside was total. They moved by touch alone, palms against rough concrete shoulders, brushing slime-slick walls, feet feeling forward into invisible water. Outside, voices echoed above the bridge. Nothing in the ditch. "Check beneath," Bakary hissed softly. "Faster." Diallo leaned close to Aissatou. "Can you keep going?" She nodded, though he could hear the strain in her breathing. "I can." He wanted to believe her. He wanted desperately to believe her, but each step sounded heavier now. Her free hand kept going to her belly. Not dramatic, protective, instinctive. It tore at him every time. Behind them, a flashlight flashed into the pipe entrance. All three froze. A beam of white light cut through the darkness for one terrible second, stopping just short of them because of the bend farther ahead. "Too much debris," a voice muttered outside. They couldn't get far in there. Another voice answered, sharp and impatient. "Then circle the far end." Bakary cursed under his breath. "Move." They pushed on harder. The culvert bent left, then narrowed. Water rushed faster around their legs. Somewhere ahead, the pipe gave way to a larger drainage chamber where storm runoff collected before spilling toward the outskirts of the city. Bakary knew because he had used this route before. That thought lodged inside Diallo like a thorn. Used it before. How long had Bakary been hiding like an animal under roads behind walls in abandoned places? And why had no one ever asked questions that mattered? Why had Diallo never asked them himself? Because hate was simpler, because grief liked straight lines. Because once a family chose its villain, everyone slept easier. They emerged into the larger chamber at last. A square shaft opened above them, covered by a rusted grate that let in strips of storm light. Concrete pillars rose from black water. There was room here to breathe barely, room to whisper. Aissatou leaned against the wall, shaking now from cold and exhaustion. Diallo took off his wet jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders without thinking. She looked up at him, surprised. He looked away first. Bakary sank against a pillar and pressed hard at his wound. "We have a minute, maybe two." Diallo turned to him. "Then use it." Bakary gave a dry laugh. "Still ordering people around. I'm done being treated like a fool." Diallo stepped closer. "You said Mamadou is behind this. You said the past I know is a lie." "Fine. Speak." Aissatou lifted her hairhead, watching both men with red-rimmed eyes. Bakary studied Diallo for a long second, as if measuring whether anything he said would matter. Then he spoke quietly. "The night our father collapsed, he didn't just lose money." Diallo's jaw tightened. "I know what he lost." "No," Bakary said. "You know what they allowed you to hear. Missing accounts. Debt. Public humiliation. That's the bedtime version." Lightning flashed through the grate above them. Bakary continued. "Your father discovered money was being siphoned out of the company for years. Not by outside thieves, by someone inside his circle, someone he fed, trusted, protected." Mamadou Diallo said. Bakary nodded once, and others under him. "Shell suppliers, ghost workers, false land acquisitions. Money moved so slowly and cleverly that by the time our father saw the whole shape of it, the rot had already reached the walls." Diallo folded his arms tightly across his chest, less from defiance than from the cold trying to enter him. If father knew, why didn't he expose him? He tried. The answer landed hard. Bakary adjusted the bloody cloth at his side and grimaced. "He called me to the old records office that night. He had ledgers copies names. He was shaking. Not from fear, from shame. He kept saying the betrayal was worse because it wore the face of loyalty. For a second, Diallo saw it, their father proud and stern, pacing with papers in his hand, wounded less by theft than by intimacy poisoned. He wanted to go to the police at dawn, Bakary said. But he made one mistake. He confronted Mamadou first." Aissatou closed her eyes briefly. She had heard this part before. It still hurt. What happened, Diallo asked, though suddenly he was not sure he wanted to know. Bakary's gaze went distant. "I was in the hallway when I heard them shouting. Father called him a snake. Mamadou called him careless. By the time I ran in, father had collapsed against the desk. His hand was on his chest. Mamadou had the ledgers." Diallo's mouth went dry. "You're saying he killed him? I'm saying he knew exactly what stress would do to a man already sick and pushed anyway." Bakary's voice hardened. He didn't need a knife. He needed timing. The drainage chamber seemed to shrink around them. Diallo remembered that week too well. His father's sudden decline, the whispers, the ambulance too late, the family friends who came offering polished sympathy and helpful explanations. Mamadou's calm voice everywhere, arranging, guiding, simplifying, comforting, controlling. "He told everyone you stole the money," Diallo said slowly, as if discovering the words while speaking them. Bakary laughed again, but it broke in the middle. Not immediately. First he told me to disappear if I wanted our mother left alone. Diallo stared at him. He had already planted enough evidence to bury me. Bakary went on. A transfer tied to my name, witnesses paid, security logs altered. If I stayed, I would be arrested before sunset, and father would die believing his son robbed him. If I ran, I'd look guilty, but mother would live. What Mother Diallo snapped before he could stop himself. Yours was Bakary met his eyes. Yours, too, in the ways that mattered when we were children. The words stung because they were true. Bakary's mother had not carried Diallo in her body, but after Diallo's own mother died, she had fed him bandaged, scraped knees, broken up fights, and placed extra bread on his plate when no one was looking. Later, when family politics hardened the house into borders, those memories had been the first things Diallo chose to erase. Aissatou spoke softly. The documents your father was collecting. Bakary kept part of them. Diallo turned to her. You saw them? She nodded. Not all. Some copies. Not enough to destroy Mamadou alone, but enough to prove Bakary wasn't lying. Bakary reached slowly into the inner lining of his torn coat. Diallo tensed, but he only pulled out a small oilskin pouch. From it he removed a folded, water-stained paper protected in wax. Look! Diallo took it. Even in the dim light from the grate, he recognized his father's handwriting immediately. A notation beside account figures. Initials. A name half-written, then scratched over in angry strokes. And one sentence underlined so hard the pen had nearly torn through the paper. M has access to all signatures. Check land transfer before Friday. Diallo stopped breathing. M, he said. Bakary nodded. Mamadou. It could mean many things. It could, Bakary said. That's why I kept digging for years instead of walking into a police station with scraps. Mamadou owns people, Diallo. Clerks, officers, drivers, men with knives and patient smiles. If I surfaced too early, I died for nothing. Aissatou stepped in gently. He contacted me because he learned you were preparing to expand the company into the same land network Mamadou has used before. He believed once you signed those papers, you'd be trapped inside the fraud without even knowing it. Diallo looked at her. So you decided for me. I decided to buy time. Her voice trembled now, but she didn't look away. Because every time I tried to tell you something was wrong, you defended him before I finished the sentence. You trust strength too easily when it sounds confident. That cut deeper than accusation, because it felt less like blame than truth. Above them, voices sounded again. Different now. Farther away at first. Then closer. They may have gone through the channel. Bakary pushed himself off the pillar with a grunt. We need to move. Diallo still held the paper. He looked at Bakary, really looked. The gauntness, the wound, the exhaustion layered over old pride. Not innocence. Bakary had clearly done things to survive. Hard things, ugly things perhaps. But innocence was never the point. The point was whether Diallo had built his entire adult life around a lie chosen for him by another man. And that answer was beginning to terrify him. Why come back now? Diallo asked. Bakary's face changed. Something fragile passed through it. Because Mamadou is running out of patience, he said, and because your child is coming. I could live with you hating me. I could even live with history calling me a thief. But I couldn't die knowing he would do to your son what he did to us, says him inside a family poisoned by a lie, and call it protection. Silence. Rain rattled above. Aissatou covered her mouth, tears bright in her eyes. Diallo looked down at the paper in his hands. His father's writing. His father's warning. Years too late. Then he heard it metal scraping above the grate. A shadow crossed the opening. The metal grate above them rattled again. Once. Then harder. Dust and rust flakes drifted down through the narrow openings and landed in the black water at their feet. Isatu recoiled against the wall, one hand over her mouth, the other wrapped around her belly. Bakari lifted his head toward the shaft, every muscle in his body tightening despite the blood loss. Diallo folded the paper from his father and shoved it deep into his inner pocket, as if he could protect the truth by pressing it against his chest. Another scrape. A flashlight beam stabbed through the grate. It moved across the chamber ceiling, then along one pillar, then another. Bakari whispered, "They can't get through easily. The bolts are old but stubborn." Diallo looked up. "And if stubborn loses?" Bakari's mouth flattened. "Then we stop being quiet." A voice came from above, distorted by rain and metal. I saw movement. Another voice answered, impatient. "Open it!" Isatu sucked in a breath. Diallo turned to her immediately. "Can you stand?" She nodded too fast. "Yes." But when she tried to push herself off the wall, pain crossed her face in a flash too sharp to hide. Her hand gripped her lower abdomen. Not a theatrical motion, not panic. Something deeper, something that made the air around Diallo change. He stepped to her at once. "What is it?" "Nothing." Her voice was thin. "Just stress." Bakari looked at her and did not pretend to believe that. How long she avoided his eyes. "It comes and goes." Diallo stared at her. How long Isatu swallowed. "Since the house." The words hit him like cold iron. Since the house. Since before the ditch, before the gunshot, before the culvert. She had been carrying pain through all of it, and he had been too consumed by betrayal to see what was in front of him. His shame came fast and vicious. Above them, metal groaned. One bolt popped. The sound snapped the moment in two. Bakari pointed toward a low side tunnel half hidden behind one of the pillars. "Overflow channel. It leads to the pumping station." "In this condition?" Diallo asked, looking at Isatu. "In any condition," Bakari shot back. "Unless you want her beneath this grate when it opens." The flashlight beam above passed over them again. This time it paused. A shadow moved. Down there a voice shouted. Everything exploded at once. The grate shrieked. Boots slammed against metal. Bakari grabbed Diallo's shoulder and shoved him toward the side tunnel. Diallo pulled Isatu with him. She gasped as her foot slipped in the water, but he caught her before she fell. Then a hand burst through the loosened grate above, reaching blindly into the chamber. Another bolt snapped. "Move!" Bakari roared. They ran for the side tunnel. If what they were doing could be called running. Bakari limped hard, half stumbling, half dragging himself through water that splashed to his knees. Isatu could barely keep balance on the slick concrete. Diallo stayed beside her, one arm around her waist, bearing more of her weight with every step. Behind them, the grate crashed open. A man dropped into the chamber with a grunt and a splash. Then another. Flashlight beams slashed through the darkness, wild and blinding. "There," one shouted. A shot cracked. Concrete chipped near Diallo's shoulder. Isatu cried out and ducked reflexively against him. Bakari turned, grabbed a loose brick from the ledge and hurled it. The brick smashed into the nearest flashlight. Glass burst. Darkness swallowed one beam. "Go!" Bakari shouted. They plunged into the overflow channel. It was narrower than the culvert and lower too. Diallo had to bend. The ceiling dripped rust-colored water. The walls were slick with algae. Behind them, angry voices echoed, amplified by the tunnel, until they sounded like a pack of animals. Isatu stumbled again. This time she did not hide the pain. A soft, broken sound escaped her throat. Diallo stopped. "We're not doing this." Bakari nearly collided with them, furious. "What are you talking about? She needs a hospital. And the men behind us need a grave." Bakary snapped. Neither option is nearby. Choose the problem you can survive first. Diallo looked at Isatou. Tell me the truth. Her face was pale now, rain and tunnel water clinging to her skin. Her lips trembled before she answered. I started feeling tightening earlier tonight. I thought it would pass. Tightening. His voice dropped. Isatou. I did not want to make it worse. She whispered. The tunnel behind them flashed white again. They were getting closer. Bakary pressed his hand to his wound and hissed through his teeth. The pumping station is less than 200 meters. There's an access ladder. From there we reach the service road. If we're lucky, I hid a motorbike nearby 2 nights ago. If we're lucky? Diallo repeated. Bakary gave him a hard stare. Tonight, that's still the best currency we have. They kept moving. The tunnel bent right, then sloped upward. The water grew shallower. The air changed to less rotten, more metallic. Somewhere ahead, machinery hummed faintly. It sounded like civilization, like safety. Diallo no longer trusted either. Isatou's grip on his arm tightened painfully. He looked down. What? My bag. He blinked. What bag? The leather one. I left it in the chamber. For a second he thought he had misheard her. You what? The bag I brought to Bakary. Her breathing quickened. It had medicine. Cash. And what? She closed her eyes. My phone. Bakary cursed. Diallo stopped dead. Your phone. Yes? With messages, Isatou nodded once, miserable. Bakary spoke first. If they unlock it, they'll know more routes, more places, maybe names. Diallo felt panic rise again, sharp and immediate. Can they? I don't know, she said. I changed the code last week. Why last week? Because I thought someone had copied the old one. That answer would have ignited 10 more questions on any other night. Tonight, there was no room. Behind them, one of the men shouted, This way! Bakary grabbed Diallo's arm. Later. They pushed forward. At the end of the tunnel stood an iron ladder bolted to the wall beneath a circular hatch. Water dripped down the rungs. Diallo looked at it, then at Isatou. She looked back at him, already knowing what he was thinking. I can climb, she said. No. I can. You can barely walk. Her eyes flashed suddenly fierce, even through the pain. Then stop wasting time telling me what I can't do. For one stunned second, even Bakary almost smiled. Then the tunnel behind them glowed with another advancing beam. Bakary motioned upward. Diallo first. Open the hatch. Diallo climbed fast, despite the wet rungs. At the top, he braced his shoulder against the hatch and shoved. It did not move. He shoved again harder. Rust screamed. On the third try, the cover lifted just enough to let dawn-grey stormlight spill down. Not dawn yet, but close. He pushed it wider and looked out. Concrete yard. Chain fence. A small pumping station building to the left. Service road beyond. Empty for the moment. He climbed out and turned back. Isatou! Bakary helped her to the ladder. She began climbing slowly, jaw clenched, every movement deliberate. Halfway up she froze. Diallo's whole body went cold. Isatou! She did not answer. Bakary looked up from below. What is it? Her voice came out thin and frightened. Something's wrong. That was the first time she had said it. Not, I'm fine. Not, it will pass. Something's wrong. Diallo reached down, caught her wrists, and pulled her the rest of the way up through the hatch. She collapsed to her knees on the wet concrete, outside, breathing in short, ragged bursts. Bakary climbed out next, slower, shaking with blood loss. The tunnel below them erupted with voices. They're at the ladder! Diallo slammed the hatch closed and looked wildly around for something to lock it with. There was a rusted length of rebar near the wall. He jammed it through the hatch handle and twisted until it wedged tight. It would not hold forever. But forever was not what they needed. Aissatou bent forward with a sharp cry. Diallo dropped beside her. "Talk to me!" She gripped his sleeve so hard her knuckles whitened. "The pain is stronger now." Bakary crouched beside them, breathing hard. "We need a car, not the motorbike." Diallo looked up. "You said you hid one." "I did, but not for this." Aissatou suddenly went still. Too still. Then she looked down at the concrete beneath her. A dark wetness spread there, mixing with rainwater. Diallo followed her gaze. For one split second his mind refused to understand what his eyes were seeing. Then his blood turned to ice. "Aissatou." Her face crumpled. "I think my water broke." The words shattered him. All at once the tunnel, the chase, the gunman, the old lies, the paper in his pocket. None of it felt larger than this. His child. Their child. Coming now, here in terror beside a pumping station, while armed men climbed toward them through the dark. "No," he said, but it was not denial. It was prayer. Bakary forced himself upright and scanned the road. "We don't have a minute to fall apart." Diallo almost struck him for that. Almost. Then he saw the truth in it. Aissatou was crying now, not loudly, just with the helpless fury of a woman whose body had chosen its own hour. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry." He took her face in both hands. "No. Listen to me. No." Her eyes searched his, filled with fear, so naked it hurt to meet them. "You stay with me," he said. "Do you hear me? You stay with me." The hatch behind them boomed from below. Once. Twice. The men were forcing it. Bakary pointed suddenly toward the service road. Headlights cut through the rain in the distance. A vehicle was coming. Diallo looked up, hope and dread colliding in the same breath. Bakary's face hardened. "That," he said, "is Mamadou's black SUV. Nay, of the men had found them. The black SUV rolled through the rain like a hearse. Its headlights cut across the pumping station yard, pale and merciless, turning the falling water into silver needles. The engine slowed. Not rushed, not uncertain. Whoever sat inside was not searching. He was arriving. Diallo rose to his feet slowly, placing himself between the vehicle and Aissatou. Behind him she was still on her knees, one arm wrapped around her stomach, the other braced on the slick concrete. Her breathing had become uneven, shallow, then deep, then shallow again. Every few seconds pain rippled through her face before she forced it back down. Bakary stood at her side, barely steady himself. One hand pressed hard against his wound, the other gripping the rusted pipe he had snatched from the yard. The hatch behind them boomed again. The men below were still trying to force it open. Bakary spat rainwater and blood to the side. "Perfect. We're trapped between wolves and their owner." Diallo's eyes stayed on the SUV. "Are you sure it's him?" Bakary let out a humorless breath. "Mamadou doesn't send this car for errands." The driver's door did not open, neither did the rear passenger door. For 3 long seconds the SUV simply sat there in the rain, engine running, lights on, as if the man inside enjoyed the effect of dread before the conversation even began. Then the rear door opened. Mamadou stepped out holding a black umbrella. He was dressed with the same ruthless elegance Diallo had seen for years, tailored charcoal suit, polished shoes that should have had no place in this mud-silver watch gleaming beneath his cuff. Age had deepened his face but not softened it. His beard was neatly cut. His posture was straight, calm, controlled. He looked like a man arriving at a board meeting, not a man who had just chased a pregnant woman into labor. Diallo's chest tightened so violently it almost made him dizzy. There was something especially monstrous about evil when it still wore dignity. Mamadou looked first at Bakary, then at Aissatou, then at Diallo. A sad smile touched his mouth, so practiced it almost passed for tenderness. "Diallo," he said, "I hoped I was wrong." The sound of his voice hit harder than Diallo expected. Too familiar, too deeply rooted in years of childhood. Mamadou had once been the man who taught him how to knot a tie, how to greet foreign investors, how never to let anger show first in negotiation. Now that same voice moved through the rain like oil over water. "You should not have come here tonight," Mamadou said. Diallo stared at him. "You followed my wife." Mamadou sighed as if disappointed by the lack of subtlety. "I protected what your father built. That has always required unpleasant vigilance." Bakary laughed once, sharp with contempt. "There it is. He steals a life and calls it guardianship." Mamadou did not even glance at him. "You should have stayed buried, Bakary." The hatch behind them shuddered from another impact. Aissatou gasped softly and bent forward. Another contraction. Diallo knelt beside her instinctively. "Look at me." She tried. Tears mixed with rain on her cheeks. "It's getting closer." His heart lurched. He looked up at Bakary. How close? Bakary shook his head. "I don't know. I'm not a doctor." "No," Mamadou said mildly, standing a few meters away beneath his umbrella. "But you are a liar, with a talent for bringing ruin to any house that shelters you." Diallo snapped upright. "Enough." Mamadou's eyes moved to him. For the first time there was a flicker of something else in them. Not fear, calculation. "Come home," Mamadou said. "Now. Bring your wife. Leave him here. He has already infected enough of your bloodline." Bakary barked a laugh despite the pain. "Listen to him. The man poisons generations and still talks like a priest." Mamadou's gaze sharpened, but his voice remained smooth. "You were always weak where it mattered. Your father saw it too late." The sentence landed like a blade. Bakary lunged a half-step forward before the pain bent him double. Diallo barely noticed. His whole attention had narrowed to Mamadou's face. There were lies men told to survive, lies men told to win. And then there were lies so old they no longer sounded like lies when spoken aloud. Diallo had lived inside Mamadou's version of reality for years. He saw that now with sickening clarity. The hatch boomed again. One corner lifted. Bakary whispered, "We're out of time." Diallo ignored him. "My father wrote your initial beside the missing accounts." Mamadou's expression did not break. "He also wrote that you had access to all signatures." Diallo continued, stepping forward. Rain streamed down his face. "You confronted him before he collapsed." Now Mamadou tilted his head slightly, almost admiringly. "So Bakary finally gave you scraps," he said. "Did you kill him?" Diallo asked. The rain seemed to hold still. Mamadou looked at him for a long moment, then slowly closed the umbrella. Water soaked his shoulders instantly. He did not care. When a man spends his life pretending strength is morality, Mamadou said it does not take much to finish him. Only truth delivered at the right temperature. Aissatou inhaled sharply behind Diallo. Bakary whispered, "You hear him." Diallo did hear him, more than the words, the shape beneath them. Not denial. Never denial. Mamadou stepped closer by one pace. "Your father was already collapsing under the weight of his own vanity. I merely showed him the structure had rotted. He chose to die offended." Something inside Diallo tore open. Years of discipline, years of controlled grief, years of misplaced rage. All of it lit at once. He moved before thought could catch him. He crossed the distance in 2 strides and slammed Mamadou against the SUV so hard the umbrella flew into the mud. The old man's head hit the metal with a dull crack. Diallo grabbed his suit front and drove a fist into his jaw. Once. Twice. A third time, Diallo Aissatou's cry stopped him. Not because she defended Mamadou, because there was something in her voice worse than panic. Pain. He turned. She had collapsed sideways onto one hand, the other clamped beneath her stomach. Her face was white with terror now, no strength left for pride. Bakary was beside her, instantly lowering himself with visible agony. Aissatou, stay with me. Mamadou straightened against the SUV blood at the corner of his mouth, still calm, still terrifyingly composed. He touched his lip, looked at the blood on his finger, and actually smiled. You see, he said softly, always emotion first. That is why your father lost. That is why you almost will. The hatch behind them burst upward. One of the gunmen hauled himself halfway out. Bakary snatched the rusted pipe and swung with everything left in him. Metal cracked against skull. The man toppled back into the opening with a scream, but another set of hands grabbed the edge. Then another. We need to leave now, Bakary shouted. Diallo looked at the SUV, a vehicle, large enough, fast enough. Mamadou saw the thought form and laughed under his breath. You think I came here without control of the keys? He lifted them slightly in one hand. Bakary stared. Of course. Aissatou cried out again, not louder, deeper, the sound of a body reaching its limit. Diallo's vision tunneled. Everything became brutally simple. He walked back to Mamadou, who seemed to mistake the movement for another blind attack. It wasn't. Diallo grabbed the older man's wrist, twisted hard, until the keys dropped, then drove his forehead into Mamadou's nose. Bone crunched. Mamadou staggered back with a raw sound he had probably not made in years. Diallo caught the keys before they hit the ground. Behind him, Bakary laughed, a shocked, savage laugh. That was for childhood. The hatch exploded fully open. 2 men climbed out. Bakary swung again. The pipe hit one in the shoulder. The other fired. The shot cracked across the yard. Bakary jerked, then stumbled, but stayed standing. Bakary stir! Aissatou screamed. Diallo whirled, keys clenched in one fist, and saw blood spreading darker across Bakary's shirt. Not fresh from the old wound. New. He had been hit. Still he stood there between the gunman and Aissatou, like a man holding up a collapsing wall with his own bones. Diallo sprinted to the driver's door, yanked it open, and shouted, Get her in! Bakary half-carried, half-dragged Aissatou toward the back seat. She was barely able to move now. Diallo vaulted into the driver's seat. The engine was still running. Mamadou had never imagined needing to flee his own trap. One of the gunmen raised his pistol. Bakary shoved Aissatou into the rear and turned just enough to throw the pipe. It struck the shooter's wrist. The shot went wild, blasting a side mirror apart. Then Bakary collapsed against the doorframe. Diallo leaned across the seat. Bakary, breathing in ragged bursts, shoved the door closed with his good arm and slapped the roof. Drive, little brother, little brother. The words sliced straight through the chaos. Diallo slammed the SUV into gear just as Mamadou lunged toward the passenger side. Too late. The tires screamed across the wet yard. They shot through the open gate and onto the service road while bullets cracked behind them. Inside the SUV, Aissatou was crying softly in the back seat, curled around her belly. Bakary had fallen beside her, one hand pressed to the new wound in his side, his face grey with pain. Diallo gripped the wheel so hard his knuckles burned. Rain blurred the road ahead. His mind was split in 3 directions: hospital pursuit and the shattered remains of a man he had called family. Then the dashboard screen lit up. An incoming call. No name, just a number. The car's speakers clicked on before he could reject it. Mamadou's voice filled the vehicle, calm as ever, despite the blood and violence they had left behind. You can run to the hospital, Diallo, he said. But if your wife survives tonight, ask her about the envelope she never showed you. Diallo's blood froze. Aissatou looked up from the back seat, horror washing over her face. And in that moment, Diallo knew the night still had not finished taking things from him. The phone line went dead. Only rain remained, rain on the windshield, rain hissing under the tires, rain beating against the black SUV, like the night itself was trying to break in and finish what it had started. Diallo kept both hands on the wheel, but everything inside him had shifted again. The envelope. He had no idea what envelope Mamadou meant, but Aissatou did. He saw it in the rear-view mirror before he even turned fully. Her face had gone still in the most terrifying way possible. Not confusion, not anger, recognition. Bakary saw it too. Even through pain, even with blood on his hands and his breathing turning shallow, he lifted his head from the back seat and fixed his gaze on Aissatou. What envelope? Aissatou pressed one hand to her belly and the other against the leather seat, as if trying to keep herself anchored in a car that was moving too fast through a life that had already gone too far. Diallo, she whispered. Keep driving. That was not an answer. Diallo's jaw tightened. What envelope? Another contraction hit her before she could speak. Her body folded around it. A low cry escaped her throat, quickly swallowed, but not before it tore straight through him. He nearly swerved. Breathe, he said, voice rough. Aissatou, breathe. Bakary reached for the handle above the door, bracing himself. The nearest hospital private clinic in Mermoz, Diallo said. 12 minutes in good weather. Bakary looked at the rain-blurred road. This is not good weather. No, Diallo snapped. It isn't. He hit the accelerator harder. The SUV surged forward. Behind him, Aissatou tried to steady her breathing, but the rhythm kept breaking. Diallo knew enough to understand what that meant. Fear, exhaustion, pain, perhaps. Labor advancing too quickly. His mind kept swinging between two terrors. Get her to the clinic. Don't drive into a trap. And now there was a third. The envelope. He hated that Mamadou had placed it there. Hated even more that it had worked. Aissatou finally spoke, her voice thin and strained. It wasn't what you think. Bakary let out a painful laugh. That sentence has destroyed more homes than fire. Diallo did not smile. Then help me. What am I supposed to think? She closed her eyes. After I found Bakary, after I saw the first papers, I knew we needed copies of everything. Not only what he had kept. Something current. Something that tied Mamadou's old theft to what he is doing now. Bakary's expression changed. You went into the office? Aissatou nodded once. Diallo felt cold spread through him. My office number. Mamadou's private archive room at headquarters. For 2 full seconds, Diallo said nothing. Then you broke into Mamadou's office, while 7 months pregnant. Aissatou flinched at the anger in his voice. I had no choice. You had me. At that she laughed once, a tired, wounded sound with no humor in it. That hurt more than if she had shouted. You did not have me, she said quietly. You had Mamadou. Every time. The words sat in the car like smoke. Bakary looked out the window, letting the silence cut where it needed to. Diallo's grip tightened on the wheel. He wanted to reject her, wanted to defend himself, to say she was unfair, that she had hidden too much, risked too much, lied too much. But the night had stripped him of easy lies about everyone else. It was beginning to do the same to him. What was in the envelope, he asked. Aissatou opened her eyes. Copies of land transfer records, shell company filings, cash disbursements tied to fake community projects, and a voice recorder. Bakary stared at her. Recorder. She nodded. I thought if I could make Mamadou speak, really speak, we could connect the past and the present. Not just old betrayal. Ongoing fraud. Diallo's mind flashed through recent months. Mamadou urging him toward expansion. Certain rural acquisitions. Unusually aggressive timelines. Quiet pressure to sign before the end of the quarter. Always land. In a country where land meant votes, contracts, loyalty, survival. Where is the envelope now? Diallo asked. This time she hesitated too long. Bakary answered first, reading her face. You hid it. Yes. where Aissatou looked at Diallo in the mirror, and what he saw there was not guilt exactly. It was fear of losing his trust again, just when he had only begun to turn back toward her. "I gave it to someone," she said. The car seemed to shrink. Bakary swore under his breath. Diallo's voice went dangerously soft. "To who? A lawyer? What lawyer? Mariam Ndiaye?" Bakary blinked in surprise. "Mariam from the Civic Accountability Center." Aissatou nodded. Even through the storm of his own emotions, Diallo recognized the name. Mamadou would know it too. Mariam Ndiaye was not famous because she was powerful. She was dangerous because she was difficult to buy. For years she had built cases around stolen land, political laundering, corporate intimidation. Quietly. Relentlessly. That changed the shape of everything. Bakary leaned back with a sharp breath as the car hit a pothole. "Then why didn't you tell me?" "Because if either of you were taken," Aissatou said, voice shaking, "I wanted at least one thing outside the circle. One person no one in this family could betray. No one in this family." The sentence cut all three of them in different ways. Diallo looked at the road ahead, then at her again in the mirror. "When I met her 4 days ago. And you kept that from me too." "Yes," Bakary muttered. "At least she's consistent." Aissatou ignored him. "I was going to tell you, Diallo. I swear I was. But then I found the listening device under your car seat. Then I saw the pickup near the clinic again. Then Bakary was attacked. Every hour I waited, it became harder to know which truth would save us and which one would get us all killed. Diallo wanted to say something cruel, wanted to ask whether she had any idea what this felt like, finding her in that house, hearing secret after secret unfold while the floor of his life kept dropping away. But one look at her in the back seat stopped him. She was soaked pale, half-curled around pain, fighting to stay present for a baby that might come too soon because adults around him had built too much of life on silence and control. So he asked the question that mattered more. "Did Mamadou get the envelope?" "No." "You're sure, yes?" She swallowed. "But he knows it exists. That means he will assume Mariam has it or knows where it can be found." Bakary exhaled slowly. "Then Mariam is in danger." Aissatou nodded. So was anyone connected to her now? Diallo drove faster. The clinic sign finally appeared ahead through the rain, a white building with blue trim and emergency lights glowing like a promise he no longer trusted but desperately needed. He swung the SUV under the entrance canopy and braked so hard the tires chirped. Orderlies ran out with a wheelchair the moment they saw Aissatou. Diallo was out of the car before the engine fully died. He yanked the rear door open and lifted her carefully. She cried out at the movement and clutched his shirt with both hands. For 1 second, forehead pressed against his shoulder, she was not strategist or secret keeper or source of torment. She was just his wife. Terrified. "Stay with me," he said again. This time her answering nod was weak. The nurses took her through the doors in a blur of wet shoes, urgent voices, and bright white light. Questions came fast. How many weeks? How frequent are the contractions? Any bleeding water broken history allergies? Diallo answered what he knew and hated how little that sometimes was. One nurse stopped him at the labor ward doors. "You wait here." He almost shoved past her. Then he saw the steel in her eyes and stopped. Behind him, Bakary staggered through the entrance by himself, leaving dark drops of blood on the polished floor. A receptionist screamed. Seconds later, 2 more nurses were dragging him toward emergency treatment, while he protested weakly that the woman mattered first. The waiting area fell strangely quiet after that. Too bright. Too clean. Too ordinary for a night like this. Diallo stood in the center of it, rainwater pooling beneath him, hands empty for the first time in hours. Then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it. But tonight, unknown had become another name for fate. He answered. A woman's voice came low and urgent. Mr. Diallo, yes. This is Mariam Ndiaye. His spine straightened. Where are you? Moving, she said. And not safely. Your wife told the truth. I have the envelope. I also have copies sent to 2 secure locations in case something happened to me. For the first time that night, Diallo felt something close to breath return to his lungs. Then Mariam continued. But there's a problem. Of course there was. He's already started cleaning house, she said. 2 registry clerks are missing. 1 witness is dead. And the most important file in the envelope is incomplete. Diallo's heartbeat slowed in the worst possible way. What's missing? The last signed transfer authorization, Mariam said. The one proving Mamadou used your name to legitimize the land chain. Without that, his lawyers will argue everything was done under company authority. Diallo closed his eyes. His name. Used as a weapon. Used as a shield. Mamadou has the original, he asked. I don't think so, Mariam replied. I think someone else took it first. Diallo opened his eyes. Who? There was a pause on the line. Rain whispered against the clinic windows. Then Mariam said very carefully, According to your wife, the only person who might know is Bakary. And if that's true, he hasn't told either of you everything. Diallo stood motionless. The phone pressed to his ear as the labor ward doors swung open at the far end. A doctor stepped out, scanning the room. When her eyes found him, her expression was grave. And Diallo knew before she spoke that the night had just broken open again. Diallo dropped the phone. It did not fall far. It struck his thigh, slipped from his wet fingers, hit the polished clinic floor, and spun in a circle before the screen went dark. He barely noticed. The doctor was already walking toward him. Everything in her face was controlled. Professional. Careful. Too careful. For one terrible second, Diallo could not move. His body remembered every corridor in which bad news had once arrived, dressed in calm voices and clean coats. His father. The company crisis. The funerals of trust that never used coffins. Now this. He forced himself forward. My wife. The doctor lowered her voice. She is alive. The baby is alive. But her labor has accelerated under severe stress. We are trying to stabilize her before deciding whether we can delay delivery or prepare for an emergency birth. Alive. The word should have relieved him. Instead, it shattered him in a different way. Because survival was no longer a guarantee. It was a negotiation. Can I see her? Not yet. His jaw tightened. I'm her husband, and I'm trying to keep her from bleeding out on my floor, the doctor said, not cruelly, just firmly. Please do not make me spend energy fighting you when I need it elsewhere. That stopped him. Barely. Behind him, the automatic doors hissed open again. 2 security guards rushed in from the front entrance after hearing the earlier commotion with Bakary. The receptionist was explaining too much, too fast. A nurse moved past with blood bags. Someone cried in another corridor. Somewhere deeper in the clinic, a baby wailed another family's crisis, another life entering the world while his threatened to split apart before reaching it. The doctor glanced toward the emergency wing. The wounded man with you? My brother, Diallo said automatically. The word surprised him as soon as it left his mouth. The doctor noticed but said nothing. He's conscious for now. Not stable, but conscious. If there is information, the police need speak to him soon. Police. The word hit like a spark in dry grass. Diallo looked toward the front entrance. Rain washed the glass doors in silver sheets. Outside, the black SUV still sat beneath the canopy lights, its engine ticking as it cooled. A piece of Mamadou's power parked right outside a maternity clinic. He turned back to the doctor. Lock every external door. No one enters without staff authorization. No one. If any man comes asking for my wife, you call the police before you answer." The doctor studied him for half a second, reading more than he said. Then she nodded once. Already done. She walked away. Diallo bent, picked up the phone and stared at the dark screen. Mariam's call had ended. The last signed transfer authorization was missing. The one document that could tie Mamadou's present fraud directly to Diallo's name being used without his informed consent. And Mariam believed Bakary knew more. Of course he did. The night had been nothing but layers of withheld truth. Diallo turned and walked quickly toward emergency treatment. Bakary was in a curtained bay with an IV in his arm and fresh gauze packed against the gunshot wound. He looked worse beneath the bright lights. Skin grey, lips dry, eyes still sharp, though pain had dragged their edges downward. He glanced up when Diallo entered. "That face means either the baby is coming," Bakary said hoarsely, "or the world has invented a new betrayal." Diallo pulled the curtain shut behind him. Mariam called. Bakary's expression changed at once. He pushed himself higher against the bed despite the pain. "She's alive?" "Yes." "And the envelope?" "She has it." Bakary shut his eyes briefly in relief. Genuine relief. Not relief for himself, for the case, for the truth. Diallo noticed that. Then he said, "But the most important file is missing." Bakary opened his eyes again. "The final transfer authorization," Diallo said. "The one proving Mamadou used my name." Bakary looked away. That was enough. Rage came fast and clean. "You know where it is." Bakary said nothing. Diallo stepped closer to the bed. "Tell me I'm wrong." Bakary swallowed. Rain tapped faintly at the emergency wing windows. Machines hummed. Somewhere outside the curtain, a nurse laughed briefly at something, the sound so ordinary it felt obscene. "Tell me I'm wrong," Diallo repeated. Bakary gave a tired exhale. "You're not wrong." Diallo's whole body went rigid. "Then where is it?" Bakary's voice stayed low. "With Mamadou." The answer landed so hard it almost felt like physical impact. Diallo stared at him. "What I had it once," Bakary said. "Years ago. Not the current file, an earlier trail that led to it. Enough to prove he was preparing to transfer land through forged authority. I kept chasing the chain. But 3 months ago, one of his men caught up to me in St. Louis. I escaped. The file didn't." Diallo's mouth filled with bitterness. "So you lost it." Bakary's eyes hardened. "I survived losing it. That document could save my wife, my child, my name. It could condemn you too." Bakary shot back, suddenly fierce, despite the blood loss. "Don't you understand how this works? Mamadou kept the latest version because it's leverage. If he releases it one way, you look complicit. If he destroys it another way, you have no defense. He doesn't only collect money, Diallo. He collects exits." Silence fell. The truth of it was monstrous. Mamadou had not merely stolen. He had designed futures, traps years in the making, escape routes only for himself. Diallo rubbed a hand over his face, exhausted fury grinding through him. "Then why didn't you tell Mariam that?" "Because I wasn't sure he still had it." Bakary winced, breath hitching as pain moved through him. "And because once I said that out loud, it meant there was only one way left to get proof." Diallo looked at him. Bakary met his gaze evenly. "Make him confess on record." The room seemed to sharpen. The outline of it appeared all at once. Not running, not hiding, not waiting for legal miracles. Forcing Mamadou into the open, using his arrogance, his need to control the story, his certainty that he still understood them better than they understood him. Diallo's heartbeat slowed into focus. Bakary saw it happen. Yes, he said. That face. That's the one I remember from before they got to you. Before they got to you. Not an insult this time. A lament. Diallo glanced toward the curtain toward the corridor that led to labor and delivery. My wife could deliver early because of this. I should be beside her. And you should, Bakary said. But if Mamadou reaches this clinic first, or Mariam, there may not be a world left where standing beside her means safety. That was the cruel genius of nights like this. Love and duty refused to line up. Every choice abandoned something. Diallo took out his phone and called Mariam back. She answered on the second ring. Tell me. He likely still has the authorization, Diallo said without greeting. A sharp inhale at the other end. Then we need him speaking before dawn. Once markets open, he'll start erasing the remaining chain. He already has armed men moving. I know, Mariam replied. One just followed my second car and not me. That buys time, not safety. Diallo looked at Bakary, then at the rain beyond the narrow emergency window. Can you receive live audio? A pause. Then yes. And route it to police and 2 media desks simultaneously. Another pause, shorter this time. If the signal holds. Bakary watched him now with complete attention. Diallo said, Then prepare. Mariam's voice dropped. What are you about to do? He looked at his brother. At the bandages, at the years stolen, at the piece of childhood still bleeding on a clinic bed while his wife fought labor down the hall. Then he answered, I'm going to invite Mamadou somewhere he believes he already owns. Bakary smiled for the first time that night. Not happily, but like a man watching a locked door finally begin to open. The abandoned house, he said. Diallo nodded. Mariam caught enough through the speaker to understand. Too dangerous. Yes, he'll suspect a trap. He will. But he'll come anyway. Because he still thinks fear makes us predictable. Bakary shifted, grimacing. He'll also come because of me. He won't leave loose blood alive now. Diallo's gaze sharpened. Can you stand? Bakary gave him a look halfway between insult and amusement. With hatred, anything is possible. The curtain snapped open. A nurse stepped in, startled to find both men standing, one literally, one spiritually, inside a storm of plans. Mr. Diallo? He turned at once. The nurse's expression softened. Your wife is asking for you? Everything else fell away for a second. The trap. Mamadou. Mariam. Police. Documents. All of it. Only Aissatou remained. He followed the nurse down the corridor. The labor room smelled of antiseptic and fear. Machines blinked softly. Aissatou lay propped against pillows, damp curls stuck to her forehead, one hand resting over the curve of her belly, as if apologizing to the child inside for the violence of the world outside. When she saw him, her eyes filled. Not with accusation, with relief. That nearly broke him more than anything else. He went to her bedside and took her hand carefully. They say the baby is still holding, she whispered. For now. He nodded because his voice would not come. She studied his face. You know something. He did not lie. Yes. About Mamadou. Yes. And you're going after him. It was not a question. Diallo lowered his head once. Aissatou closed her eyes briefly, pain and understanding moving through her together. When she opened them again, there was fear there, but something else too. Trust. Fresh, wounded, miraculous trust. You come back to me, she said. He bent and pressed his forehead gently to hers. I will. No, she whispered, gripping his hand harder. Not just Alem, whole. Don't let hatred finish what he started in this family. The words entered him like medicine and punishment both. He kissed her brow and stepped back. Outside the room, Bakary was already being helped into a wheelchair by a furious nurse who clearly did not know she was assisting a man on his way to bait a monster. Diallo looked once more through the glass panel at Aissatou, then at his brother, then at the rain-dark world waiting beyond the clinic doors. The house, he said. Bakary nodded, and somewhere far deeper than fear, the night prepared for judgment. By the time Diallo and Bakary left the clinic, the rain had softened into a cold, steady mist. Not enough to calm the city, not enough to cleanse anything. Dakar before dawn looked like a place holding its breath. Streetlights flickered over wet roads. Stray dogs moved between shuttered storefronts. Water gathered in potholes and reflected neon signs in broken colors. The world felt suspended between confession and consequence. Diallo drove. Bakary sat in the passenger seat this time, one hand pressed against the fresh dressing beneath his shirt, the other holding Diallo's phone. Mariam was connected through an encrypted audio line, silent for now, listening. 2 trusted journalists had been looped in on standby. A police contact she believed still clean was waiting for a confirmed trigger phrase before moving. Everything depended on sound, on timing, on Mamadou's pride. The abandoned house appeared at the edge of the district like a memory no one had the courage to demolish. Its broken roof and cracked walls rose black against the paling sky. The same place where jealousy had turned Diallo into a fool. The same place where truth had first started tearing through the lies he had lived by. He parked without speaking. Bakary looked at him. Once he arrives, do not rush him. Diallo kept his eyes on the house. You mean don't kill him before he talks? Bakary's mouth twitched despite the pain. That too. Diallo stepped out. Cold air hit his face. He welcomed it. He needed something sharp and physical to hold back the storm inside him. His wife was in a clinic bed, possibly hours away from giving birth too early. His child's first battle had already begun before breath, and he was here returning to the scene of everything because a man who had fed off their family for years still believed he could shape the ending. Bakary joined him more slowly. For a moment they stood side by side in silence. Not healed, not even close, but no longer facing opposite directions. Diallo broke the silence first. When this is over, you tell me everything you still haven't. Bakary gave a tired nod. If we live, you can hate me properly with all the facts. That almost made Diallo laugh. Almost. Instead, he took the phone from Bakary and checked the audio feed. Live. Recording. Transmitting. Mariam's voice came softly through the earpiece. I'm here. Police waiting. Media waiting. Bakary leaned against the car door, breathing carefully. Then let's invite the devil. Diallo dialed Mamadou's number. It rang only once. Interesting. Too ready. Mamadou answered, as if he had been holding the phone and smiling at it. Diallo. Come alone, Diallo said. A low chuckle came through the speaker. Men say that when they already know they're not alone. You want Bakary. Yes, you want the envelope. A pause. Slight. Meaningful. Then Mamadou said, I want order. Diallo looked at the broken house. Then come restore it. Another small pause. Mamadou understood immediately. The house. The symbolism. The challenge. I taught you better than melodrama, Mamadou said. No, Diallo replied. You taught me control. I learned the rest from surviving you. This time the silence lasted longer. Then, stay where you are. The line went dead. Bakary exhaled through his nose. He's coming. He was always coming, Diallo said. They went inside. The house smelled exactly the same, wet dust, rotting wood, old fear. The room where Diallo had first seen Aissatou kneeling beside Bakari seemed smaller now, less supernatural, just broken plaster, overturned crates, and the remains of bad decisions. Funny how places lost their power once you finally understood what had happened in them. Bakari positioned himself near the back wall, where shadows could help him if the pain weakened his stance. Diallo stood in the center of the room, waiting. Minutes stretched. The sky outside slowly shifted from black to bruised grey. Then headlights washed across the broken windows. A single vehicle. Mamadou kept his word. Or kept enough of it. The engine cut off. A car door opened. Closed. Footsteps approached through wet gravel. Bakari's hand tightened invisibly at his side. Diallo did not move. Mamadou entered without hurry. No umbrella this time. No polished performance of dignity. Blood still darkened one side of his face from where Diallo had struck him earlier, and a strip of white tape crossed the bridge of his nose. Yet somehow he still carried himself like a man inspecting property he expected to retain. His eyes found Bakari first. Then Diallo. "I see you found each other." "At last," he said. Bakari's voice came low and flat. "You sound disappointed." "I am," Mamadou replied. "Families are most useful when they stay divided." The words settled into the room with hideous ease. Mamadou stepped farther inside rainwater slipping from his coat onto the floor. He looked around once, almost nostalgically. A fitting place. Ruins make honest witnesses. Diallo held up the phone casually at his side screen, dark to avoid attention. "Talk, then." Mamadou smiled faintly, still giving orders with empty hands. "Am I empty-handed?" Diallo asked. Mamadou's gaze sharpened. "You think recorded outrage becomes justice?" "No," Diallo said. "But truth becomes expensive when too many people hear it at once." For the first time, Mamadou's expression cooled. Bakari stepped out of the deeper shadow, enough to be fully seen. "He's right. You spent years keeping every version of the story under one roof. That era is over." Mamadou looked at him with old contempt. "You always mistook noise for leverage, and you always mistook fear for loyalty," Bakari shot back. The room tightened. Diallo let the silence pull just long enough, then spoke. "Tell me about the land transfers." Mamadou did not answer. "Tell me why my name was used." Still nothing. "Tell me why my father wrote your initial beside missing accounts before he collapsed." That landed. Mamadou's face changed, not into guilt, but irritation, as if Diallo had forced a vulgar subject into a refined room. "You were a boy," he said. "You understand less of business than you think." "Then educate me," Diallo replied. Bakari almost smiled. Mamadou's eyes moved between them. He saw it now. The altered balance, the fracture in his old design. The brothers were not reconciled, but they were aligned enough. That alone was dangerous. So he adjusted. He stepped closer and lowered his voice, confiding rather than arguing. "Your father was not a victim," he said to Diallo. "He was a proud man who mistook inheritance for competence. He was losing control of the company, the land, the political ties, and the debts. I did what was necessary to keep all of you from drowning with him." Bakari barked a laugh. By stealing everything first, Mamadou ignored him. "Do you know what would have happened if the full accounts had surfaced, then bankruptcy? Asset seizure, public scandal, criminal inquiries. You still soft with youth. The women in your house at the mercy of creditors. The family name dragged through every paper in the country." Diallo stared at him. "So you forged signatures, moved land, used shell companies." "I stabilized collapse," Mamadou said. "There it is," Bakari said. "He poisons the village and calls himself water." Mamadou's patience thinned. "And what did you do, Bakari Run? Hide, bleed in gutters. You were never made for responsibility." Bakari took the hit without flinching. "No, I was made inconvenient because I saw you too early. That one struck. Mamadou turned sharply to him. You saw fragments and invented morality around them. I saw enough, Bakary said. I saw father clutching his chest while you held the ledgers. I saw you plant evidence. I saw you threaten our mother. I saw the transfer chain start before anyone knew land would become the real currency. Mamadou's eyes narrowed. And still you survived only by disappearing. That should tell you which of us history wanted. The cruelty of that sentence seemed to change the temperature in the room. Diallo stepped forward. History didn't want you. History tolerated you because men like you learn how to stand beside grief and rename yourselves necessary. Mamadou looked at him, then really looked. Something almost like pride flickered there, twisted and unclean. You could have been magnificent if you had learned not to feel so much. And you could have been human, Diallo said. That was when Mamadou finally let the mask slip. Only a little. But enough. His voice lost its silk. Humanity, he said, is a luxury purchased by men standing on clean foundations. Your family never had that. Your father inherited favor, squandered discipline, and would have buried all of you beneath sentiment. I corrected the direction. Yes, I used your name when needed. Yes, documents moved. Yes, signatures were guided. Better a controlled theft than total ruin. The words hung there. Clear, usable, deadly. In Diallo's ear, so faint it was nearly imagined, came Mariam's whisper. We have it. But Diallo wasn't done. What about Aissatou? He asked. What was she to you? Another point of pressure. Mamadou's mouth hardened. She should have stayed a wife. Women who go looking for structure behind walls often dislike what they find. Bakary surged half a step forward, fury blazing, but Diallo's arm barred him. No, Diallo said quietly. Let him finish. Mamadou looked at Bakary, then back at Diallo, and made his fatal mistake. He grew confident. The child complicated timing, he said. I would have preferred not to involve it. But bloodlines matter. Fear travels best through generations. The room went still. Even Bakary seemed stunned into silence. Diallo felt something icy and absolute settle inside him. Not rage anymore. Judgment. He raised the phone so Mamadou could finally see the red recording light on the screen. Mamadou's face changed. Only then. Too late. Outside, tires screamed on wet gravel. Then came the slam of multiple doors. Voices, commands, police. Mamadou moved instantly, not backward, but sideways toward the nearest broken window. Fast. Far faster than a man his age had any right to be. He had planned for flight even while speaking. Bakary lunged to intercept him. Pain slowed him. Mamadou struck first, driving an elbow into Bakary's wound. Bakary folded with a raw cry. Diallo launched himself forward and caught Mamadou just as he reached the window frame. The two men crashed into the wall. Rotten plaster burst around them. Mamadou fought viciously, not like an old businessman, but like a man who had spent his whole life surviving by striking the soft places first. He hit Diallo's throat, then his ribs, then reached for something inside his coat. A knife flashed. Diallo grabbed his wrist with both hands. The blade hovered inches from his chest. Their faces were suddenly close. Mamadou's breath smelled of blood and rain. "You were never meant to outlive my design," Mamadou hissed. No, Diallo said through his teeth. "I was meant to inherit it. That was your real mistake." With a violent twist, he slammed Mamadou's knife hand against the window frame until the blade clattered away. Then he drove him face first into the wall and pinned him there just as armed officers stormed through the doorway. Police down. Mamadou went still. Not broken, not repentant, just still calculating even now. The officers dragged him back, forced him to his knees and cuffed his wrists. One read charges, another seized the knife, a third moved to Bakary, who was slumped against the wall but conscious. Outside, dawn finally broke in a thin grey line across the city. Mamadou looked up once at Diallo while being hauled to his feet. For the first time in all the years Diallo had known him, the older man had nothing left to teach. Only one final poison to spit. "This will not save your name," he said. Diallo looked at him, chest heaving, and answered with perfect calm. "No, it saves my son from inheriting your lie." Mamadou was taken outside. The house fell quiet. Bakary laughed weakly, then winced at the pain. That, he said, was worth getting shot twice. Diallo turned to him, and before he could answer, his phone rang again. The clinic. Fan 10. The phone trembled in Diallo's hand. For one raw second he could not answer. Not because he did not want to, because every part of him already knew that whatever came through that line would matter more than police lights, more than handcuffs on Mamadou's wrists, more than the first thin stripe of dawn breaking over the ruined house. Bakary saw his face and said nothing. He did not need to. Diallo answered. "Yes." The nurse's voice came fast, breathless, but controlled. "Mr. Diallo, this is Mame from the clinic. Your wife's labor is advancing. The doctor says you need to come now." That was all. No reassurance, no promise. Just now. Diallo was moving before the call ended. He barely remembered speaking to the officers. Barely remembered telling them Bakary needed transport back to the clinic under guard, that Mariam had the recordings, that Mamadou must not be allowed a private call to anyone outside council. The police captain, a broad-shouldered woman with a scar near her chin, nodded once and said she already had the audio mirrored to Central Command. But the world had already narrowed. Only the clinic remained. Only Aissatou. Only the child who had chosen a night of betrayal, blood, and rain to begin forcing his way into the world. Diallo drove like a man, outrunning his own past. The city was waking now. Vendors setting up stalls beneath damp awnings. Buses coughing dark exhaust into the grey morning. Women balancing baskets under umbrellas. Stray dogs shaking rain from their backs. Everything looked ordinary in the cruel way morning often does after disaster. Streets did not care what had almost been lost before sunrise. At a red light he did not stop, for his hands shook for the first time. Not from anger, from aftermath, from the sudden collapse of control once the fight was over, and love was all that remained. He reached the clinic in less than 10 minutes. The automatic doors opened before he touched them. A security guard recognized him and waved him through. Somewhere during the night, his story had already become the kind people whispered about in hallways without knowing even half of it. The labor ward was brighter now. Too bright. A doctor met him outside the room. The same one from before, coat, changed sleeves, rolled face, tired. "How is she?" "She's still fighting," the doctor said. Still fighting. Even now, Aissatou was being described not as a patient, but as a force. "The baby is early," the doctor continued, "but the heartbeat is present. Stronger than I expected. Your wife is exhausted. Stress accelerated everything. We're beyond trying to stop it now." Diallo swallowed. "Can I see her?" The doctor held his gaze for a beat, then stepped aside. "Yes, but listen carefully. What she needs most in there is steadiness, no more chaos, no more fear." He nodded once and entered. Aissatou lay against white sheets that made her look even paler. Her curls were damp against her forehead. Her lips were dry. Monitors blinked and hummed around her like tiny, cold witnesses, but her eyes, when they found him, were still entirely alive. Relief broke across her face so openly that Diallo had to stop walking for half a second to keep himself from falling apart. "You came back," she whispered. He crossed the room and took her hand in both of his. "I told you I would." Her fingers tightened weakly around his. Whole. The question struck him harder than she could know. Was he whole? No. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. But he understood what she was really asking. Had hatred taken the last part of him Mamadou had spent years trying to build toward? Had revenge become the final inheritance? Diallo leaned down and pressed his forehead gently to hers. I came back to you, he said. That is the part that matters. A tear slipped from the corner of her eye. He kissed it away before he even thought about doing it. For a few seconds there was no company, no land theft, no blood feud between brothers, no years of manipulation, only the two of them holding on to each other at the edge of something painful and holy. Then another contraction hit. Aisatou's whole body tensed. Her grip crushed his hand. A cry broke from her throat, sharp and involuntary. Diallo stood his ground beside the bed, murmuring whatever words came. Breathe, I'm here, look at me. Stay with me, none of them wise, all of them true. Between waves of pain, she looked at him again. What happened? She asked. He knew what she meant. Not the clinic, not the labor. Mamadou. The police took him, Diallo said. Something loosened in her face. Not joy. Exhausted relief. And the recording, Mariam has it. The police have it. Media too, if needed. Aissatou let out a trembling breath that sounded almost like laughter. Good. He shook his head in wonder and grief. You nearly died to protect documents. No, she whispered, eyes already wet again. I nearly died to protect what those documents could save. He understood then with painful clarity. Not reputation, not money, not even justice alone. The future. Their child's future. A family not built on a lie. A name that would not rot from the inside. A chance, however costly, for truth to enter before inheritance hardened into destiny. Diallo sat beside her and did not let go of her hand. Hours seemed to pass inside minutes. Minutes stretched into whole lifetimes. Nurses came and went. Instructions were given. Monitors changed their rhythm. Aissatou drifted between fierce concentration and exhausted whispers. At one point she apologized for the leather bag, for the secrecy, for the fear. Diallo stopped her with a quiet, aching firmness. No more apologies between us while you are doing this. She gave him the faintest tired smile. Bossy, she murmured. Only when terrified. That earned the smallest laugh from her thin, breathless but real. It nearly undid him. Later the doctor returned and checked her progress. Then she looked at Diallo, and for the first time there was something hopeful in her face. It's time. Everything changed. The room filled with purposeful motion. Nurses adjusted equipment. Instructions came in quick, practiced tones. Aissatou bore down with a strength Diallo would remember for the rest of his life, not delicate, not graceful, but fierce in a way that made every story men told about power seem childish. This was power. This woman, shredded by fear and betrayal and physical pain, still choosing life forward. Diallo stayed where she could see him every time she opened her eyes. At one point, gasping and trembling, she whispered, If something happens, no, Diallo, no! His voice broke for the first time. Nothing happens without you. Do you hear me? Nothing. The doctor gave him a brief look that said she had heard worse declarations and loved none of them less for being impossible. Then the final moments arrived. Pain, breath, command, effort. A scream torn from somewhere primal and ancient, then a cry. Small, ragged, alive. The sound split the room open. For one suspended second, nobody moved inside Diallo's mind. The entire world seemed to halt around that thin newborn cry, as if dawn itself had waited for permission to begin. Aissatou collapsed back against the pillows, sobbing with relief. Diallo covered his mouth with one hand because if he had not, he might have shattered out loud. The doctor lifted the child, briefly wrapped in white slick with the brutal miracle of arrival. "A boy," she said. "A boy." Diallo stared. His son looked impossibly small. Furious at the air, alive in the most demanding way possible. The nurse placed the baby against Aisatou's chest first. That was right. That was sacred. She looked down at him with the kind of stunned love that makes every other ambition in the world feel cheaply made. Then she looked up at Diallo. There it was, no speech, no grand line, just truth passing silently between them. We made it, not unscarred, not untouched, but through. When the nurse finally invited him closer, Diallo stepped forward as if entering holy ground. He touched his son's tiny hand with one finger and felt it curl around him instantly. That did it. Everything he had held upright all night gave way. Not into collapse, into tears. He bowed his head and wept quietly beside the bed, while his wife watched with exhausted tenderness, and their son announced himself angrily to the world that had almost failed him before he arrived. Much later, when the room had calmed and the first light of full morning warmed the edge of the curtains, Bakary appeared in the doorway in a wheelchair, pale and bandaged, escorted by a nurse who looked unconvinced this visit. Had medical approval. He stopped when he saw the baby. Something in his face crumpled. Not dramatically, just enough for Diallo to understand that some wounds did not start in the body. Aissatou beckoned him in with a weak smile. Bakary rolled closer eyes, shining. He looks like he already distrusts everyone. That Diallo said voice rough with emotion is probably wise. For the first time in years, the laugh that passed between the brothers was not bitter, only tired, only human. Bakary looked at the child for a long moment, then at Diallo. "I won't ask for forgiveness today." Diallo met his eyes. "Good." Bakary nodded once. "But I will spend whatever years I have left earning the right to stand near this boy without poisoning the room." A long silence followed. Then Diallo said quietly and with full awareness of the cost, "That is a beginning." And it was. Not healing complete, not a family magically restored, but a beginning built on truth rather than performance, on consequences rather than denial, on a newborn child whose first gift from the adults around him, hard-won and late, would be honesty. Outside the clinic, the city fully woke. News would spread before noon. Mamadou's arrest, the recordings, the land scandal, questions about Diallo's company. Trials, losses, public shame. Asset reviews. Years of rebuilding. Let them come. As Diallo stood beside Aissatou and looked at his son sleeping against her chest, he understood something at last. A house built on lies does not collapse when truth arrives. It had already been collapsing for years. Truth only lets you decide what to rebuild from the ruins. He bent and kissed Aissatou's forehead again. Then his son's. And under the quiet hum of hospital machines and morning light, the first real peace of the night finally entered the room. Sometimes the deepest betrayal is not the lie itself, but the silence that allows it to grow across generations. This story reminds us that truth is often painful before it becomes healing. Diallo believed strength meant control, distance, and never looking weak. But in the end, real strength was not found in wealth, anger, or revenge. It was found in the courage to face the truth, protect the innocent, and break the cycle before it reached his child. Aissatou showed that love is not always soft. Sometimes love is dangerous, lonely, and misunderstood. Sometimes it means carrying fear in silence, just long enough to save the people you love. And Bakary proved that even a broken past does not erase the value of repentance. A wounded soul can still choose sacrifice. A lost man can still become part of redemption. Life teaches us that family is not healed by pride. It is healed by honesty, responsibility, and the humility to admit when we were wrong. Not every truth will save a relationship instantly. Not every wound will close in one day. But the moment people choose truth over comfort, light begins to enter even the darkest house. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments which moment hit you the hardest and what lesson stayed with you the most. And if you love emotional stories about